Now where the BRICS summit presently on, and this is where the focus is going to be on one bilateral meeting. Prime Minister Modi to meet Xi Jinping, Chinese president. Now, this is no ordinary meeting. Remember, this specifically comes after the LAC talks that have happened. And can India-China really reach a certain decision to ensure that they can work together on border issues here on? Prime Minister Modi will be holding this meeting today itself, is what India Today can confirm to you. It will be on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. The two leaders shared the stage last night also. Look at that image on your screen. This was the group dinner concert hosted by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, the meeting comes between India and China specifically after the Ladakh standoff and specifically the Galwan Valley standoff. Remember, the Indian and Chinese troops clashed in 2020, and it's been over 4 years of deadlock now. There have been Corps Commander level talks, but didn't yield much result. Have we at least reached a certain deliberation to be able to indulge in a phased disengagement? But anybody who knows China also would rather trust their actions, not simply words. Amid all of this, remember that the bilateral meeting is going to take place it's going to be in the first in 5 years. I remember there was one in Mahabalipuram, more of an informal meeting that had happened, and therefore this one in Russia on the sidelines of BRICS could be very crucial. What could be on the agenda?
I can confirm that there will be a bilateral meeting held between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. The exact time and other logistics are being worked out, but the meeting will take place.
Sir, नमस्कार. मेरा नाम गौरव सावंत है. I work for India Today and आज तक. सर, चीन के रुख में ये परिवर्तन आया कैसे आपकी दृष्टि में? और जब पेट्रोलिंग दोबारा रिज्यूम होगी, तो फिर बॉर्डर पे ट्रूप्स के क्लैशेस ना हो जाएं, क्या इसका भी कोई मैकेनिज्म है? और डिसएंगेजमेंट तो हो रहा है, क्या डी एस्केलेशन और डी इंडक्शन की भी बात हो रही है?
अभी जो अरेंजमेंट्स और अभी तक जो समझौता हुआ है, उससे पहले हमें ग्राउंड पे इम्प्लीमेंट करना है. ये एनालिसिस कि ये कैसे हुआ, इसको मेरे विचार में बाद में देख सकते हैं. आपने कहा कि जो आगे फेस ऑफ्स ना हो, क्लैशेस ना हो, उनको कैसे रोका जाए. मेरे विचार में बहुत ही ये एक अहम आपने सवाल, एक अहम मुद्दा उठाया है. और हमारी आशा है और हमारा प्रयत्न रहेगा कि जो अरेंजमेंट्स वर्कआउट हुए हैं, जिन पे समझौता हुआ है, वो ऐसे अरेंजमेंट्स हो जिनसे इस तरह के क्लैशेस रुक सकें जो पीछे हुए हैं कहीं कहीं पे लाइन ऑफ एक्चुअल कंट्रोल के पास. तो इसमें आगे हमें देखना पड़ेगा और लगातार प्रयत्न करना पड़ेगा, लगातार कोशिश करनी पड़ेगी कि जो मैकेनिक्स हो जो अग्रीमेंट के, वो ऐसे रहें कि इस तरह के जो क्लैशेस हैं उनको रोका जा सके. जहां तक आपका अंतिम प्रश्न है कि डिसएंगेजमेंट हो गया है या हो रहा है और डी एस्केलेशन और डी इंडक्शन की बात कहाँ आती है, मैं फिर से यही कहूंगा कि अभी हमें पहले डिसएंगेजमेंट पे फोकस करना है और डी एस्केलेशन और डी इंडक्शन की बातें सही समय पे होंगी.
So that very pertinent question that was asked by India Today's Gaurav Sawant is also as much about what this big highlight is going to be. Gaurav now joins me live. Gaurav, thank you for bringing in this perspective. You tell me, what can we expect? One of the first bilaterals in 5 years between India and China. How significant can we expect this to be?
It's a very crucial day for India-China relations as Chinese President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi hold their first bilateral interaction in 5 years. Now, an effort was made after the Doklam crisis of 2017, or Dolam as we call it, to ensure that the relationship remains on an even keel. So the Wuhan initiative and the Mamalapuram initiative was undertaken. But unfortunately, China threw it all out of the window with its transgressions in 2020. And after that, India has been very, very firm that economic relationship, strategic relationship, people-to-people relationship, all of them, India is very keen to move forward, as is China, but that can only happen when there is peace and tranquility at the borders. Now, China was very insistent, let's leave the borders to a future generation to solve because it's a legacy issue, but India was insistent that the remaining two friction points, Depsang in the north of eastern Ladakh and Demchok in the southern part of eastern Ladakh, that too has to be addressed and addressed effectively effectively for forward movement. And China has agreed to disengagement at Depsang and Demchok. So very, very crucial. A tactical disengagement has been agreed to. The strategic direction for it, perhaps on the road ahead, will come from Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping in hours from now.
But it's eventually about what Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri also said, that statement about after the standoff that we've seen at the LAC, the kind of talks that have happened that eventually now leads to this bilateral meeting. You tell me then, Gaurav, what is the significance of that statement, of those discussions that have been done, possibly reaching that there can be a phased disengagement?
China has been extremely keen on, one, normalization of ties, and two, increasing economic cooperation with India. However, India has repeatedly insisted that peace and tranquility at the borders is essential for the other aspects of the relationship to move forward. And a major point that was mentioned by the Foreign Secretary was that it's not just the soldiers who will go up to their patrolling points. The grazers, the shepherds, they'll be able to take their sheep and their yak, their cattle to their traditional grazing ground, as was the situation in 2020 before the standoff took place at Pengongso and Galwan. So that's a very, very major step. However, this is an agreement on paper as of now. Disengagement process, we are told, is underway, and that's a tactical level decision that's being implemented by commanders on ground. That's a military level discussion, but that higher direction will now come from the Prime Minister and the Chinese President on whether this disengagement can lead to de-escalation, and de-escalation would mean taking those longer range weapons of war to some distance away, whether it's the 155mm howitzers, the armored personal carriers, the tanks. India has both T-72 and T-90 tanks. The Chinese have their long range rockets and missiles that have been deployed. And then ultimately de-induction of the 50,000 plus troops on either side who've been there since the summer of 2020. They moving back to their peacetime location. And that's a very tough ask, because what India is also insisting on, remember, Chinese as of now have better infrastructure at the line of actual control, and India is trying to catch up. To an extent it has, but at the same time there is still that parity is still not there. So when India is talking about parity in security, it means that India should be in a position to effectively have additional number of troops closer to the border compared to the Chinese, because they can mobilize faster. And we've seen the way they de-inducted initially from the south bank of Pengong. So how quickly were they able to do so? They can equally quickly redeploy. Therefore, that parity in security has to be maintained, and that is something that India is insisting on. You may trust, but you have to verify, because with the Chinese, as we've often said, it's not what they say, because they say a lot of very sweet things. It's what they do on ground that must be seen to know their real intention.
Absolutely, that's the base point when it comes to China, and we have seen it in 1962 and ever since, that trust only their actions, never the words that come in from China. I request you to please stay on with me, Gaurav, because this BRICS summit is no ordinary summit. This is at a time when there are leaders at this summit which are countries that are involved in full-fledged war. Russia, which is the host, also then West Asia region. All of that is where India's role gets very prominent. India has been sending out a message of peace. Prime Minister Modi has also spoken up and said, this is with regard to Russia-Ukraine conflict, that it needs to be resolved through dialogue and diplomacy, and that India, if required, is ready to help restore peace in the region. And also that there has to be stability, not only in the world, but specifically in these two regions of West Asia, Russia, Ukraine, so that the world can move ahead. Now, also amid all of this, remember, Prime Minister Modi met Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on the sidelines of the BRICS summit, discussing the West Asia conflict, specifically with regard to Israel. India has called for immediate de-escalation, exercising restraint, and stepping back from violence to help return to a path of normalcy.
एक्सेलेंसी, रूस और यूक्रेन के बीच चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय पर हम लगातार संपर्क में रहे हैं। जैसा मैंने पहले भी कहा है, हमारा मानना है कि समस्याओं का समाधान शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से ही होना चाहिए। शांति और स्थिरता की जल्द से जल्द बहाली का हम पूरी तरह समर्थन करते हैं। हमारे सभी प्रयास मानवता को प्रमुखता देते हैं। आने वाले समय में भी भारत हर संभव सहयोग देने के लिए तैयार है।
Государства стояли у истоков создания объединения.
हम रूस और भारत के बीच जो सहयोग चल रहा है हम वो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण मानते हैं।
И очередное заседание межправкомиссии намечено на 12 ноября в Нью-Дели.
और 12 दिसंबर को नई दिल्ली में अंतर सरकारी आयोग की अगली बैठक होने वाली है।
Последовательно развиваются крупные проекты.
हमारी बड़ी परियोजनाएं लगातार विकसित हो रहे हैं।
И мы приветствуем ваше решение открыть в Казани Генеральное консульство Индии.
और जो आपने कजान में भारत का कौंसल जनरल खोलने का निर्णय लिया हम इसका स्वागत करते हैं।
Расширение дипломатического присутствия Индии в России будет способствовать дальнейшему развитию двухсторонних отношений.
भारत के कूटनीतिक उपस्थिति से हमारे सहयोग को फायदा मिलेगा।
Уважаемый господин премьер-министр, мы очень рады видеть вас и всю вашу представительную команду в России.
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी हम आपको और आपकी प्रतिनिधि मंडल रूस में देखने से हमको बड़ी खुशी है।
The leaders also shared perspectives on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Prime Minister reiterated that dialogue and diplomacy was the way forward to achieve resolution of the conflict. He briefed President Putin about his engagements with the Ukrainian leadership and noted that India stood ready to contribute in bringing peace. Prime Minister congratulated him on his recent victory and reaffirmed India's commitment to deepening the age-old bilateral ties with Iran. In fact, both leaders emphasized repeatedly the shared historical and civilizational ties that underpin their bilateral relations. The discussion focused on key areas of cooperation, particularly the Chabahar port and the international north-south transport corridor.
Gaurav continues to be with us. Gaurav, I'll take that question to you because that is what I find more interesting. This summit is being organized at a time when there are literally these wars going on. India is friendly to all of these nations. So what do you think is possibly then India's role, specifically at the summit, when it comes to these wars that are literally raging across the world?
Civilizationally, India has always sought peace, and the Bharatiya Sabhyata, Indian civilization, is all about playing the role of Shanti Doot or a peacemaker. Yogeshwar Shri Krishna was a Shanti Doot ahead of Mahabharata, where he sought to broker peace between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Or if you look at the Ramayana era, once again, Maryada Purushottam Shri Ram sent first Angad to ensure that there could be peace, whether Ravan would return Mata Sita, and ensure that there could be peace and lives would not be lost. However, when that effort failed, the battles actually followed. But the effort should never be negated, and that's the effort India is making constantly, even in modern times. Prime Minister Narendra Modi traveled to Russia. In July, he spoke to President Putin. Then he subsequently traveled to Ukraine, spoke to President Volodymyr Zelensky, learned what either of them had in their mind, exchanged some ideas. Now he's returned to Russia once again, and they discussed at length how peace pays rich dividends, and any conflict resolution cannot happen in the battleground. For that, dialogue and diplomacy are extremely essential. India is willing to offer help should both sides want India's help. Similarly, when he met, President Masoud Pezeshkian of Iran, who's become a member of BRICS, Iran this time, and this is the first meeting that's taken place after President Pezeshkian's election as President of Iran. He came to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Prime Minister's hotel. They had a very warm meeting and a very good meeting. When we journalists, when we asked President Pezeshkian how was his meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he said it was a very, very good meeting. So even there, both India and Iran are very keen that conflict resolution in West Asia can take place. Civilian lives should be saved. There should be no loss of civilian lives. And whether India, extremely close to Iran, very, very close to Israel, whether India can play a role in ensuring that peace comes to West Asia. So India's effort is constantly on. But it's not just what India preaches. India practices what India preaches, and that we've seen from the disengagement out of persistent and perseverance in India's diplomacy and, of course, military might, that India and China are disengaging at Demchok and at Depsang. However, whether this peacemaking effort also leads to de-induction and de-escalation remains to be seen. But India practices what India preaches.
All right, Gaurav Sawant will be updating us consistently on this BRICS summit. Gaurav, I'll come back to you in just a short while. Thank you for bringing us these reports. Now, remember, these are intense political discussions. Strategic issues are discussed, and amid the conflict, a lot of serious chatter, of course, is done. But then there are light-hearted moments as well, and that's where Prime Minister Modi and Vladimir Putin's friendship or bonhomie was seen during one of these interactions, where a translator usually is needed. But this time, Vladimir Putin made a light-hearted remark saying to Prime Minister Modi, "You don't really need a translator when I talk. You understand me without one." And that perhaps is reflective of all that's unfolding in Russia and between the two leaders. Leaving you with this.
Должны принять целый ряд важных решений, направленных на дальнейшее совершенствование деятельности объединения и укрепление многопланового сотрудничества в его рамках. У нас такие отношения, что я считал, что вы и так все понимаете.
हमारे इतने रिश्ते हैं कि मुझे ऐसा लगा कि आपको कोई अनुवाद नहीं चाहिए.